After the Madras Native Association became defunct, there was no such public organization in the Madras Presidency. As many educated Indians viewed the situation with dismay, the necessity for a political organization was felt. And in May 1884, the Madras Mahajana Sabha was organized in the inaugural meeting held on 16th May 1884. The prominent participants were G. Subramaniam, Veeraraghavachari, Anant Charlu, Rangaya, Balajirao and Salem Ramasamy. With the launch of the Indian National Congress after the completion of the second provincial conference of Madras Mahajana Sabha, the leaders after attending the first session of the Indian National Congress INC in Bombay amalgamated the MMS with the INC. The idea of forming a political organization that would raise issues and grievances against the colonial rule did not emerge in a vacuum. Between 1875 and 1885, there were many agitations against British policies in India. The Indian textile industry was campaigning for imposition of cotton import duties in 1875. In 1877, demands for the Indianization of government services were made vociferously. There were protests against the Vernacular Press Act of 1878. In 1883, there was an agitation in favor of the Ilbert Bill, but these agitations and protests were sporadic and not coordinated. From the realization was born the Indian National Congress. The concept of India was as a nation was reflected in the name of the organization. It introduced the concept of nationalism. In December 1884, Alan Octavian Hume, a retired English ICS officer, presided over a meeting of the Theosophical Society of Madras. In Madras, the formation of a political organization that would work on all India basis was discussed, and the idea of forming the Indian National Congress emerged in this meeting. The Indian National Congress was formed on 28 December 1885 in Bombay. Apart from A.O. Hume, another important founding member was W.C. Banerjee was elected as the first president, though the activities of the INC was then revolved around petitions and memoranda. From the very beginning, the founders of the INC worked to bring every section of the society into its ambit. One of the main missions of the INC was to develop the Indians into a nation. They were convinced that the struggle against the colonial rule will be successful only if Indians saw themselves as the members of a nation. To achieve this, the INC acted as a common political platform for all the movements that were being organized in different parts of the country. The INC provided the space for the political workers from different parts of the country. It had an all-India character, and it was the mobilization of a people on an all India basis. Opportunity for participation in the government was one of the major demands of the Indian National Congress. Demanded Indian representation in the government. High land revenue was one of the major factors that contributed to the oppression of the peasants. It demanded reduction in the land revenue and protection of peasants and exploitation, and against exploitation of the zamindars. And the Congress advocated the imposition of heavy tax on the imported goods for the benefit of Swadeshi goods. Administrative higher officials who had responsibility of administration in India were selected through civil services examinations conducted in Britain. This meant that the Indians should not afford to go to London, had no opportunity to get high administrative jobs. Therefore, Indianization of services through simultaneous Indian civil services examinations in England and India was a major demand of the Congress. Judicial, because of the partial treatment against the Indian political activists by English judges, it demanded the complete separation of the executive and judiciary. Contributions of early nationalists. And the early nationalists in the INC came from the elite sections of the society: lawyers, college and university teachers, doctors, journalists, and such others represented the Congress. However, they came from different regions of the country, and this made INC a truly national political organization. Um, the leaders of the INC adopted constitutional methods and petitions, prayers, and memorandums, and thereby earned the moniker moderates. And this was some understanding about colonialism evolving in India. There was no ready-made anti-colonial understanding available for reference in the late 19th century when the INC was formed. It was the early nationalists who helped the formation of the ideas we as a nation. They were developing the indigenous anti-colonial ideology and the strategy on their own, which helped future mass leaders like M.K. Gandhi. From the late 1990s, there were growing differences within the INC leaders like Bipin Chandra Pal, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, and Lala Lajpat Rai were advocating radical approach instead of merely writing petitions, prayers, and memorandums. They were called as extremists, and the objective became clear in 1897 when Tilak raised the call, Swaraj is my birthright and I shall have it. Tilak and his militant followers were now requesting Swaraj instead of economic or administrative reforms. The moderates were requesting through their petitions and prayers. Though they criticized each other, it would be wrong to place them in the opposing roles. Both moderates and militants, with their own methods, were significant elements of the larger Indian nationalist movement. The Swadeshi movement of 1905 directly opposed the British rule and encouraged the Indian ideas of Swadeshi enterprise, national education, self-help, and use of Indian languages. The method of mass mobilization and boycott of British goods and institutions suggested by the radicals were accepted by moderates. Both the moderates and the radicals were of the same view when it came to accepting the fact that they not to fill the role of educators. When the INC was founded in 1885, one third of the members were journalists. Most followers of the early freedom movement were involved in journalism. Dadabhai Naoroji founded and edited two journals called Voice of India and Trust Goftar. Surendranath Banerjee edited the newspaper called Bengali. Bal Gangadhar Tilak edited Kesari and uh, Maratha in the and that this is a means that they used to educate the common people about the colonial oppression and spread nationalist ideas. The news regarding initiatives taken by INC were taken to the masses through these newspapers. Bal Gangadhar Tilak was a firm believer that the lower middle classes, peasants and artisans and workers could play play role on 27 July 1897, Tilak was arrested and charged under Section 124A of the Indian Penal Code. Civil liberty, particularly in the form of freedom of expression, became the significant part of Indian freedom struggle. Dadabhai Naoroji, known as the Grand Old Man of India, was a prominent early nationalist. He was elected to the Bombay Municipal Corporation and Town Council in the 1870s, elected to the British Parliament in 1892. He founded the India Society in 1865 and the East India Association in 1866 in London. He was elected thrice to is the president of the Indian National Congress. His major contribution to the Indian nationalist movement was his book In Poverty and on British Rule of the British in India. In 1901, in his book, he put forward the concept of drain of wealth from the country. But in British India, they stated that wealth in any country, the tax raised would have been spent for the well-being of the people of that country. But in British India, taxes collected in India were spent for the welfare of England. Naoroji argued that India had exported an average of 30 million pounds worth of goods to Britain each year from 1835 to 1872 with no corresponding return. The goods were in lieu of payments for profits from company shareholders living in Britain, guaranteed interest to investors in railways, pensions to retired officials and generals, interest for the money borrowed from England to meet war expenses for the British conquest of territories in India as well as outside India. All this going in the name of home charges. Naoroji asserted made up a loss of 30 million pounds a year. Gandhiji returned to India from South Africa was 1915. English education introduced in India was in 1835. Odd one, Aurobindo was Swaraj is my birthright and I have it. Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Kesari, Dadabhai Naoroji, Voice of India, Macaulay, Minute on Indian Education, William Digby, Madras Time. English Education Act correctly matched. Madras Native Association 1852. Chronological sequence of events. Madras Native Association में Madras Mahajana Sabha, East India Association, in India Society, East India Association, India Society and East India Association. Grand Old Man in India, Dadabhai Naoroji. Poverty and British in India, Dadabhai Naoroji. British government pursued policy of free trade. India had a comparative advantage from England's free trade policy. Statement 1 correct, statement 2 correct, statement 3 correct.